Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is a deep exploration, not just into one narrow story, but really into the fundamental structures of power, wealth, and maybe most importantly, speed that are reshaping our world right now.
That's right. We've taken this collection of sources you've shared. It's a really interesting mix covering, the explosive growth of AI, but also the sort of long-term structural realities of finance and even the mindsets of these modern tycoons.
Yeah, it's quite the combination.
And what jumps out really is this consistent pattern. It seems like speed, massive scale, and access to just huge amounts of capital that has to be pretty risk tolerant. Those are the absolute must-haves for success today, pretty much everywhere you look.
So our goal here is to give you that shortcut to understanding. We want to quickly, but also thoroughly, get knowledgeable about these interconnected themes. This emerging AI world order, which seems kind of bipolar, the, let's say, meticulous high-wire act of modern finance, and then the relentless, sometimes really paradoxical strategies that today's biggest founders are using.
Yeah, we want to understand not just what empires are being built, but how. What are the key insights? What are the leverage points these figures are using to basically dictate the pace of change globally, both technologically and economically?
Okay, so let's dive in. And we'll start with maybe the ultimate advantage in this modern economy: data and speed. Specifically, looking at this tech landscape that's, well, it's redrawing the geopolitical map as we speak, right? So we kick off with this emerging global tech scene. And the sources, they really hammer home this idea that it's more than just companies competing. It feels like a bigger shift.
Yeah, they actually describe it as a new kind of bipolar world order, but this time centered entirely on AI.
Not ideology, like the Cold War, but technology, specifically AI tech.
Exactly. It's about who controls the data, who has the best algorithms, who can deploy them fastest, and the analysis, especially from experts like Kai-Fu Lee, points very clearly to two main players.
The U.S. and China.
The U.S. and China. They've jumped out to this huge lead. Some argue it might even be becoming unassailable. They're the only two nations with the full package, the complete large-scale AI ecosystems.
Okay, unassailable is a strong word.
Yeah.
So what about other places? The UK, France, Canada, countries with great universities, strong science traditions.
Yeah.
Why are they falling behind so much? What's missing?
Well, it's interesting. They absolutely have top-tier research labs, brilliant AI minds. The raw brain power is definitely there, but they seem to be missing two critical ingredients that the U.S. and China have in, well, abundance. First, that massive, dynamic venture capital ecosystem.
Meaning the money willing to take huge risks.
Exactly. That giant pool of cash that's ready to bet billions on moonshots, on ideas that, frankly, are probably going to fail but might just change the world. European VC, for instance, tends to be a bit more cautious, historically.
Okay, so that's the money side. What's the second missing piece? You said it might be even harder to replicate.
It is, because it's what feeds the whole machine. They lack the enormous, often quite centralized user bases. You need millions, hundreds of millions of people actively using services to generate the constant stream of real-world data.
The fuel for the AI.
Precisely. We're in what's being called the age of implementation. Fancy algorithms are kind of useless without data to train them on, and the best data is proprietary, it's local, it's generated constantly by tons of users.
Which brings us neatly to this core engine, data accumulation. It operates like a feedback loop, a virtuous cycle, they call it.
That's the term, and it's key because it means the leaders just get further ahead almost automatically.
How does that cycle work exactly? Break it down for us.
Sure. It's pretty straightforward, but powerful. More data from users lets you build better, smarter AI algorithms.
Okay.
Better AI leads to better products, maybe services that feel super personalized or adapt instantly to local conditions.
Right, things people actually want to use more.
Exactly. So those better products attract more users and those new users. They generate even more data, which then makes the AI even better.
And round it goes.
Round and round. Once a company, or frankly a country, reaches a certain critical mass, this cycle mathematically widens their lead. It becomes incredibly hard for anyone starting late to catch up unless they invent something completely revolutionary.
And we see this playing out in strategies, right? The sources mention China's approach to deploying tech compared to maybe the West. There's this idea of moving faster, not waiting for perfection.
Yeah, that speed and maybe a different attitude towards deployment is a big factor. Instead of waiting, say, 5 or 10 years for a completely perfect self-driving car that works everywhere.
Which might never come, or take forever.
Right. The approach described is more like deploying more limited autonomous vehicles now, but in specific controlled areas, maybe on a predictable delivery route or within a campus.
You get something working, even if it's not the final vision.
Exactly. The main goal is immediate utility. Get it out there. But the massive side effect, the unintended consequence perhaps, is this explosion in data gathering. Every mile driven, even in a limited zone, generates incredibly valuable real-world data.
Data you can't get in the lab.
No way. And that data feeds back into the algorithms, making them better, faster. It accelerates the whole learning curve.
Okay, so the sheer pace of this AI revolution is what makes it fundamentally different. You hear AI called a general-purpose technology, a GPT, like the steam engine or electricity.
Because it changes everything eventually, across all sectors.
But the speed is the kicker here. It's not like the Industrial Revolution.
Not even close. That's maybe the single most critical insight for everyone listening. Those earlier GPT transformations, they unfolded over generations, plural.
Decades, maybe a century.
Yeah, easily. Society had time, relatively speaking, to adjust. Labor laws changed, cities reorganized, legal systems slowly caught up to steam power or electricity grids. There was a buffer.
That buffer, it's just gone now.
It seems like it. Completely gone. The sources strongly suggest this AI transition will hit with major economic and social impact much, much faster. We're talking within a single generation.
Wow. One generation.
Yeah.
Why? What makes it so much faster this time?
Well, think about it. There are basically 3 catalysts speeding things up that just didn't exist back in the 18th or 19th centuries.
What are they?
First, just sheer computing power. We can process unbelievable amounts of data, petabytes, almost instantly. That was physically impossible before.
Right, Moore's Law and all that.
Second, global networks. The internet. An AI breakthrough made in, say, Silicon Valley or Beijing can literally be deployed worldwide through software updates within hours or days. The friction of distribution is almost zero.
Instantly global.
And third, the sheer volume of data itself. Billions of people connected, generating personalized, real-time information constantly. It's just orders of magnitude more fuel than previous revolutions had. These 3 things together, they're like a societal accelerant.
Which really raises a huge question, doesn't it? For people, for companies, even governments outside the U.S. and China, or maybe just slower-moving organizations. If the economy's foundations are shifting this fast within our working lifetimes, how can workers possibly reskill? How can institutions adapt? How can regulations even keep up? Especially if you're starting from behind on data and capital.
It's a profound challenge. The race is definitely on, and the clock seems to be ticking incredibly fast.
So that blinding speed of the tech world, that exponential data curve, it really stands in stark contrast, doesn't it, to the other side of the coin we're looking at. Finance, specifically the slow, steady, almost relentless accumulation of capital that economic historians like Piketty have documented.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition. We need to ground this part of the conversation in that structural analysis, particularly Piketty's work, because it underscores this incredible resilience, this durability of capital itself.
Even now, in the digital age, with software and data being so important.
Absolutely. Even modern tech, which seems intangible, still needs and uses vast amounts of physical and financial capital. You need money to build server farms, to fund massive R&D, to acquire competitors, to fuel that growth we just talked about.
So what's the underlying economic reason that capital just keeps accumulating like this? It seems like it should eventually run out of productive uses, right?
That's the classical expectation, but the data suggests otherwise. The core mechanism, and this is really crucial for listeners to grasp, is summarized in that famous inequality, RG.
R is greater than G, meaning?
Meaning the average rate of return on capital, R, what you earn from investments, rent, dividends, etc., historically tends to grow faster than the overall rate of economic growth, G, the growth of wages and output.
So money makes money faster than the economy grows overall.
Essentially, yes. If your existing wealth is compounding faster than the economy is expanding, you can accumulate huge amounts of it without necessarily driving your returns down to zero. Capital, it turns out, has so many potential uses, or can be parked in so many ways, that its return doesn't automatically diminish as it gets bigger. This inequality mathematically drives wealth concentration. Wealth grows faster than labor income, widening the gap.
And this isn't just about today's earnings. It's deeply tied to inheritance, right? Wealth passed down through generations.
Very much so. The historical data, looking back centuries, allows for some startling projections. The sources suggest that the flow of inherited wealth and large gifts as a percentage of national income, is expected to be really high throughout the 21st century.
How high are we talking?
Stabilizing somewhere around, say, 16 to 25% of national income in developed countries. Now, to put that in perspective,
That sounds like a lot.
it is. It's comparable to the level seen between roughly 1870 and 1910.
The Gilded Age. The era of Rockefellers and Carnegies. Massive inequality.
Exactly. That historical peak of industrial era fortunes and deep class divides. So the data suggests inherited wealth might be returning to a structural importance not seen in over a century, which, kind of challenges our modern ideas about meritocracy.
Okay, so that's the picture of patient, structural, compounding capital on one side. But then our sources also dive into the other side. The incredibly aggressive, tactical, high-stakes game played by modern finance, particularly private equity firms like Blackstone. They're masters at using that capital.
Right, and that's the genius, or perhaps the danger, depending on your view, of modern finance. If venture capital funding the AI race is like throwing that risky long pass downfield,
Looking for a miracle touchdown.
yeah, then the leveraged buyout, the LBO, that's Blackstone's game, it's fought totally differently. It's meticulous. It's described as a yard at a time on the ground. It's not about visionary leaps. It's about brutal financial engineering and control.
Remind us how an LBO works again. The core idea is borrowing tons of money.
That's it. You borrow a huge amount of debt to buy a company, and critically, you use the assets of the company you're buying as the collateral for those loans.
Seems incredibly risky. How do they stop the company from just collapsing under all that debt? What's this control freak approach the sources mention?
It really comes down to obsessive cash flow analysis and operational surgery. These LBO firms, they go deep inside the companies they buy. They're not just hoping for profits. They are mapping out every possible scenario.
Stress testing it.
Exactly. Can the company still make its debt payments even if there's a recession? Then they focus relentlessly on optimization. Can we shave just 1/4 of a percentage point off the interest rate on that massive debt by refinancing? Can we demand management / costs now? Can we sell off divisions that aren't core?
Squeezing every last drop of cash out?
Pretty much. The goal is always to maximize the cash flow that can be used to pay down that acquisition debt as quickly as possible. It's like management by spreadsheet, enforced by the constant threat of the debt burden.
So the value isn't necessarily created by making the company better at what it does, but by making it leaner and optimizing the finances.
Often, yes. Value is extracted by removing any perceived slack, optimizing the balance sheet, maybe using financial engineering. Efficiency is enforced because if they don't hit the numbers, the debt holders could take over. But even these giants of capital like Blackstone have their own internal controls. There's a great example in the sources.
The Celanese deals, tell us about that. It shows something about risk, right?
Yeah, it does. They were looking at this big acquisition, Celanese. They needed about $850 million in equity, their own cash, to make the deal happen.
Okay, a lot of money.
A huge amount. But Blackstone had this strict internal rule. They would not risk more than 13% of their current investment fund on any single deal, period.
So hard cap. What?
Portfolio management 101, essentially. It's immense self-discipline. It prevents one catastrophic failure from sinking the entire fund and damaging their reputation with their own investors. Because of that 13% cap, they actually couldn't fund the whole $850 million themselves. They had to go out and raise $206 million from their own investors, the pension funds, the endowments, who give Blackstone money specifically for this deal just to keep their own funds' exposure below that 13% threshold.
Wow. So even when they're playing with billions in leverage, there's still this layer of internal risk management.
Absolutely. It shows that underlying the high-stakes game is a deep commitment to controlling their own financial exposure.
But that disciplined, yet incredibly aggressive use of leverage.
Yeah.
It inevitably creates fragility in the system, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which brings us to the 2008 crisis. The sources paint a picture of just intense fear and anxiety back then.
Oh, palpable fear. The sense that the whole system was teetering. And you see the psychological impact inside the firms, like at Lehman Brothers, very vividly in the source material. After Bear Stearns went
It's
down,
the first domino.
right, the fear just spread like wildfire. Executives at Lehman's really profitable asset management arm, Neuberger Berman, they were apparently in near open revolt, utter panic.
And why were they panicking so much? Was it just loyalty to Lehman or?
Mostly self-interest, it seems. A huge chunk of their personal net worth, their bonuses, was paid in Lehman stock.
So they were watching their own fortunes evaporate in real time as the stock price tanked.
Exactly. Suddenly, their personal financial futures were on the line. They became desperate to legally separate Neuberger Berman from the parent company, from Lehman, before it dragged them down, too, which, as you can imagine, led to some incredibly intense internal battles at the very top of the bank.
And that internal pressure, that panic, it kind of shines a light on the underlying culture within these places, right? The
Yeah.
sources mention a pretty brutal level of competition.
Ruthless is probably the right word. Stephen Schwartzman, who co-founded Blackstone but started at Lehman, he recalls this incredibly cynical quote from an old Lehman partner. It tells you everything about the internal dynamic.
Oh, it was a quote.
Nobody at Lehman will ever stab you in the back. They'll walk right up to you and stab you in the front.
Wow, that's direct.
Isn't it? It wasn't just seen as aggressive, it was almost a badge of honor, a defining characteristic of the place. The environment was described as hyper-competitive, almost pathologically so, every person for themselves, rewarding individual gain, even sometimes at the cost of the firm itself. That kind of raw, competitive drive seems almost inseparable from the world of high finance and concentrated capital.
Okay, so we've gone from the kind of anonymous cold math of capital markets to the very human, often very intense mindset of the founders driving these massive companies. What is it that links these figures across time? You know, from the industrial barons like Carnegie and Rockefeller to the tech titans like Gates or Zuckerberg.
Well, if you synthesize across the sources, one thing really stands out. It's this relentless, almost obsessive focus on achieving massive scale and maintaining tight control over their ecosystem, whatever it takes, whatever the immediate cost.
And in modern tech, scale isn't just big, it's almost like a religion,
Yeah.
fueled by network effects.
Yeah, exactly, like a cult of scale. Mark Zuckerberg's early mantra for Facebook, it sounded crazy to traditional business folks at the time. Growth is primary, revenue is secondary.
Put growth before profits. Seems backward.
It does, but it turned out to be the winning strategy in that space. It was criticized as naive, but it was absolutely fundamental. Why? Because of those network effects we touched on earlier.
Explain that connection again. Why prioritize growth over making money initially?
It comes down to things like Metcalfe's law. The idea that a network's value grows exponentially, not linearly, with the number of users. Think about it. Once you build the basic platform, adding one more user costs almost nothing.
Marginal cost is near zero.
Right. But the value of the whole network to users, to advertisers, to developers goes up dramatically with each new person who joins. So the absolute strategic imperative becomes grab the biggest user base you possibly can before anyone else does. Build the monopoly first.
And worry about making money later.
Exactly. Monetization can be figured out once you own the playground.
And we see this ruthless focus on scale, even after an acquisition, right? The Instagram example is pretty telling.
Oh, absolutely. Facebook buys Instagram. Kevin Systrom, the founder, he naturally starts thinking about, okay, how do we make money? Let's talk revenue streams, business model.
Standard stuff for a business owner.
You'd think. But Zuckerberg reportedly just shut it down flat. The instruction was crystal clear. Don't worry about that right now. Just keep growing.
Use Facebook's resources to pour fuel on the fire?
Precisely. Facebook offered Instagram basically unlimited resources, money, server infrastructure, access to Facebook's own massive user base to drive signups, all directed at one single goal: accelerate growth, make Instagram ubiquitous. Profit could wait. Dominance couldn't.
But that relentless push for scale, especially through acquisition, it often comes at a cost, doesn't it? Like alienating the original users.
Huge cost in terms of trust. The Instagram acquisition immediately sparked this wave of backlash from its early loyal user base.
People felt like their cool indie app was selling out.
Exactly. There was widespread mistrust, anger. People were actively looking for signs that Facebook was ruining it, changing the vibe. So yes, Facebook leveraged its scale to make Instagram massive, but it definitely damaged the relationship with the community that built Instagram in the first place. It shows that explosive growth often involves this trade-off with authenticity and user trust.
Now, shifting gears slightly, how do these titans think about the people who actually have to build this vision, the employees?
Yeah.
The sources suggest some pretty stark management philosophies focused on maximizing output.
Yeah, some of the views described are quite harsh, almost cynical, reflecting this absolute need for peak efficiency to maintain that growth trajectory.
The Jeff Bezos example stands out, his views on workforce loyalty.
Right. The sources indicate Bezos held the strong belief he explicitly wanted to avoid creating an entrenched, overly loyal workforce.
Avoid loyalty. Why? That sounds counterintuitive.
His reasoning, as described, was that if employees got too comfortable, too settled in their roles, it would inevitably lead down a path he called the march to mediocrity.
Mediocrity through comfort.
That was the fear. His underlying logic seemed to be based on this rather bleak view of human nature that fundamentally, our nature as humans is to expend as little energy as possible to get what we want or need.
So you need constant pressure to fight that tendency.
That seems to be the implication. The management systems, things like high turnover rates, intense performance metrics, a culture of constant challenge, even internal competition. These were seen as necessary mechanisms to counteract that natural human desire for comfort and stability, to basically force productivity and prevent stagnation through relentless pressure. It's kind of corporate Darwinism.
That intensity, that drive. It also manifests in the founder's public image, their style. It's not just about the business mechanics, it's about performance.
Absolutely. The
Right.
personality, the public persona, becomes a strategic tool itself. Look at the contrast, for example, between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, based on the source material. Two giants, totally different styles, but both achieved dominance.
How would you characterize Gates' style, especially early on?
Gates was about technical mastery and setting the standard. Even as a young guy dealing with established companies like Mites for the Altair Basic deal, he projected this youthful bravado, this absolute confidence in his code.
Focused on the tech itself.
Yeah, his competitive energy was legendary. It was about Basic being better, about the efficiency of the human typable keyboard, and Microsoft's early slogan really captured it: we set the standard. The goal was control through defining the underlying rules of the game, the software ecosystem.
And Jobs, completely different focus.
Almost the opposite in a way. Jobs was about the user experience, the aesthetic, the performance, not just the tech specs, but the feeling. His guiding principle, famously quoting Da Vinci, was simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
Design and presentation were key.
Paramount. He fused product development with showmanship. The launch events themselves were strategic weapons. Think about the Macintosh launch, building the suspense, the drama, then revealing it with insanely great, flashing on the screen while the Chariots of Fire theme played.
Pure theater.
Pure theater, designed to create desire, to project genius, to captivate everyone, investors, employees, customers. So you had Gates controlling the standard and Jobs controlling the experience and the narrative, both incredibly effective paths to total control, just using different levers.
And sometimes that founder conviction, that drive for scale, it seems to tip over into something almost theatrical, maybe even delusional, where the sheer force of personality attracts unbelievable amounts of that capital we talked about earlier. Adam Newman at WeWork comes to mind.
Newman is maybe the ultimate recent example of that phenomenon. He possessed this extraordinary ability to raise staggering sums of money based almost entirely on a vision of scale and disruption, even when critics were tearing apart the actual business model.
He wasn't just selling office space, he was selling connection.
Right. He brilliantly reframed a fairly straightforward real estate arbitrage business subleasing office space into this grand tech-like mission of connecting people. He literally called WeWork Connection, but in the third dimension. He positioned it as the physical world equivalent of Facebook.
And investors bought it, big time. The fundraising stories are legendary.
Especially the interaction with Masayoshi Son of SoftBank. It sounds almost mythical. Newman apparently sells Sun completely on the WeWork vision global scale, exponential growth, after just a super brief tour and a quick car ride.
And Sun just writes a huge check.
Pretty much. Didn't haggle over the valuation details, just offered over $4 billion, apparently sketching the basic terms on a scrap of paper right there in the car. Sun was completely convinced, he reportedly said, WeWork is the next Alibaba.
Wow. So what does that tell us, ultimately, about this founder blueprint?
It highlights this incredible convergence point, doesn't it? You have the massive tools of concentrated capital we discussed, combined with this extreme risk tolerance from investors, all catalyzed by a charismatic founder selling an irresistible vision of unprecedented scale.
Even if the fundamentals look shaky.
Even then, the sheer promise of becoming the dominant player, of achieving that exponential growth, seemed to override traditional financial caution or governance concerns, certainly in Newman's case for a long time. This potent mix, the belief in speed, the worship of scale, and the power of the founder's narrative, fueled by readily available capital that really feels like the defining high-stakes blueprint for building empires in the 21st century. It connects the capital from Section 2 with the speed from Section 1, #outro.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big picture here? We've kind of followed this thread, haven't we? From the slow, persistent power of capital accumulation, that RG dynamic,
The structural foundation.
through the fast, intense, and frankly risky world of leveraged buyouts and high finance, where firms like Blackstone operate with surgical precision.
Right, leveraging that capital.
And finally, landing on the mindset of these modern founders, this relentless, almost single-minded obsession with scale, network effects, and total control, often prioritizing growth above all else.
Yeah, whether it's about gathering data exponentially in this AI race, like we see with the US and China, or acquiring companies at eye-watering valuations based purely on the potential for future dominance, the formula seems consistent. It relies on this unprecedented blend of speed and access to massive amounts of strategically deployed resources.
And we saw how those structural advantages, the deep VC pockets, the huge user bases feeding the data cycle, are giving the US and China this AI lead that, well, the sources suggest might be getting mathematically impossible for others to close.
Right. And that's layered on top of the historical reality that capital itself, even amidst all this tech disruption, remains incredibly resilient. Wealth concentration seems set to continue, maybe even accelerate, echoing past eras.
But the critical takeaway, the thing that maybe feels most urgent, is that pace of change we talked about at the start.
Absolutely. The AI-driven economic shift happening potentially within a single generation, not over multiple generations like the Industrial Revolution.
That acceleration means the next wave isn't just bigger, it's fundamentally quicker, which leaves society, institutions, regulations, even individual workers with drastically less time to adapt.
It really forces us to recalibrate our entire expectation of change, which leads to the final thought we wanted to leave you with.
Okay.
Given this incredible speed, this velocity of technological and financial transformation, all fueled by this relentless pursuit of data and capital,
Right.
how fast do our governing bodies, our social structures, our educational systems, how fast do they need to evolve just to keep pace? Just to avoid being completely overwhelmed by the power being generated by these new titans?
Where should we even focus our attention? How do we ensure that society, that ordinary people aren't just left behind by this one-generation AI revolution, and that its benefits aren't captured only by those already way out in front?
That feels like the crucial question. The race isn't just about innovation anymore. It's about societal adaptation at a speed we've likely never had to manage before. Something important to think about.